1, 2, 3, 4.
News,
Culture, astronomy,
physics,
humanities,
space,
science, travel,
Boom! Knowledge! Boom! Knowledge!
History.
humor.
technology.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are on this crazy mixed up world of wackiness. And welcome to Boom Knowledge, curating the sum of all human knowledge 25 minutes at a time, give or take. And I'm your host, Mike Vass. And time is an extremely precious resource. Thanks for sharing some of yours with me, and welcome to the show. It's March! March! Spring is just 18 days away, and I, for one, am beyond stoked about that. You can probably hear it in my voice. I can feel my power returning with the light. In the States, we'll have the glorious time change as well this month, gaining yet another hour of beautiful sunshine and more power. And here in Seattle, as we get closer to summer, clothes will start to be shed, shorts and skirts will become a thing once more, and the single contingent will get decidedly more feverish and randy as it regards the opposite sex. I mean, I at least think this is what I've observed time and time again. But is it actually a thing? My ponderings in this regard have brought me to a topic idea for this week, one that I'm pretty excited about: seasonality in sex and dating. I have a lot of my own experiences and curiosities in this regard, plus I actually kind of make a living here as well, so perfect topic for the show. And listener Tate in Folsom, California, home of the prison and the accompanying Johnny Cash song, though I'm certain Tate did not write me from prison. Well, anyway, he had two things to say. The first was that the contact form on my website is broken. He was indeed correct on that, and I have gotten it fixed. The second thing was a topic suggestion. Tate was curious about alcohol in the body. What's happening there neurologically? What brings a man or a woman from sober and relatively sedate to totally drunk and wild, wild, wild? Well, this sounds like a job for science. We love that guy! And finally, from listener Laura in Colorado comes a factoid about the bidet, prostitution, and American reticence to adopt this mechanism for our biological waste disposal needs. I'm telling you guys, no matter what I do, I cannot get away from the topic of bathroom habits on this show. But of course, I have a job to do, so do it I shall. I'm going to get to the bottom, pun completely intended, of the bidet and whether what Laura told me was accurate. Oh yeah, and as always, we'll throw a little Frag List action into the mix. And so, our humble introduction having finished its unholy business in the bathroom, or restroom, or WC, or toilet, depending wholly on listener locale, it's time to clean on up and get back to the show. Pull the handle, or the cord, or depress the button with the foot, or, man, there's a lot of ways to do this. Let's exit the stall, wash our hands, please, because germs are bad, dry off with a paper towel, or perhaps the hot blower, and exit full of relief and vigor. Our secret business complete, it's time to get on with it, spring in our step, revitalized and alive! Let's go learn some stuff. I'm currently approaching a 3-month mark without alcohol, which is really the longest I have ever gone since I started drinking many moons ago. It's not that I was an alcoholic per se, and I do believe I know those signs well enough from observation and experience with others, plus a class I took on this subject a few years back. But with me, it was more the fact that alcohol is, and this is only my personal experience, recognizing that there are, as with most things, a vast spectrum of experiences to be had. Alcohol is a great robber of time. A few drinks would quickly lead me to the place of, yeah, I could do that later. And then, of course, there is the next day. While I'm not prone to hideous hangovers, I'm prone to pizza and couch time after a big night out rather than getting up and, say, writing a podcast episode. Or in my case, 2 a week, plus running a business, plus starting a third business. And I may have taken on too much this year. But anyway, I loved drinking. It made social events more fun, dates a little more relaxed, weekend brunches with friends spicier, particularly when the Bloody Mary was packed with pepper and Tabasco, and all the rest of it. So what was going on with my little system when I made to tie one on? Side note, by the way, the phrase tie one on comes from, well, curiously, nobody seems to know for sure. In a rare bit of for this show, I actually can't tell you what the origin of the phrase is. The only thing that people seem to agree on is that we don't know, which is rare and fascinating in and of itself. Okay, what scientific magic gets us from sober to tipsy to drunk and back again? We'll start by talking about the key component that delivers the goods, ethanol. Ethanol is a psychoactive, which is a catch-all term for any chemical substance that affects the functions of the brain, causing potential alterations in mood, perception, or consciousness as a whole. Pretty much the lot of drugs you would have heard of, legal or otherwise, fall into this category. Cocaine, meth, LSD, mushrooms, tobacco, ibuprofen, caffeine, and yes, alcohol, just to name a few. Ethanol, for the record, has all kinds of other uses in addition to helping you get your heat on. It can be used as a solvent in manufacturing perfumes and varnishes, as a fuel, and as a disinfectant. And it gets you drunk. Chemically, ethanol kind of looks like a dog, and in Sweden, the molecule is even given the nickname Fyllehunden, or the drunk dog. Cute little tipsy puppy is a mixture of hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen, compact and water-soluble. That water solubility is the key to understanding ethanol's all-access pass in the human body. Remember that the average amount of water in a human is 50 to 65% or even higher. We are walking water. So Alcohol Dog can go for a walk all over our insides, and he totally does. Starting from the digestive system, he sniffs around for a short time, then strolls on into the water in the bloodstream. He also can move through lipids into the cell membranes. He'll take a casual jaunt on through the muscles and the skin. Ever notice you can smell someone who's been drinking considerable amounts of beer or whiskey or what have you, even the next day? That's alcohol literally coming out of their pores. Alcohol goes into the heart, as well as the liver, where it is eventually processed, but we'll talk about that more in a sec. Because, of course, alcohol goes for the brain, hitting you chemically on a couple of different fronts. First, ethanol binds to glutamate, the most abundant neurotransmitter in the nervous system. Glutamate is a segment in and of itself, but for the purposes of this discussion, let's just note that alcohol represses its activity, which makes the brain slower to respond to stimuli. Feeling a horse walk coming on? Well, that's what I call the clip-clop action of people who are truly stumbly drunk. Having trouble enunciating your words? Your glutamates are being inhibited there, my friend. Ethanol also binds to GABA, otherwise known as gamma-aminobutyric acid, which is a mouthful. Rather than suppressing, as was the case with glutamate, ethanol has the opposite effect on GABA, lighting it on up to make you calm and sleepy. And of course, there's my friend and yours, good old dopamine. It's released causing feelings of euphoria and happiness, though I'm sure you've all witnessed the opposite of that too with drunkenness, again, because of the deactivation of glutamate and activation of GABA. Eventually, alcohol is metabolized thanks to enzymes in your liver. Thanks, liver! This process occurs at a rate of 1 fluid ounce or 29 milliliters per hour. Longer term? Well, the poor liver can have a whale of a time keeping up and can become damaged. Alcohol is excreted as well by the kidneys to produce urine and is breathed out. And again, I am sure these are processes that will come as zero surprise to you if you have either consumed alcohol or been around others who are doing so. So there it is. To recap, ethanol chemically looks like a puppy. Your body is a serious leash-free park for drunky dog who plays in the digestive system, heart, muscles, kidneys, and of course, your brain. And your liver has a heck of a job to do cleaning up all of that dog's mess. I I've talked on the show before about the fact that I am currently a single man, but it wasn't always thus. I had a great marriage until, well, it ran its course. 13 years, of which 95% of that was very good, and no heartburn from either of us with the end result. I'd call it a legitimate success overall. But as a function of the length of that marriage, combined with a history of serial monogamy, well, I've been taking my time and taking it slow and low as it regards dating the last couple of years, which has also afforded me some room for observation. Observation part the first. The hunt for relationships seems to increase with the onset of winter. Observation part the second. The hunt for simple sexual congress in all its varying forms seems to increase with the onset of summer. So how accurate are my instincts? Well, since we are still in winter, let's go ahead and start there. The popularized term of the 2010 decade is cuffing, and I'll just go ahead and quote Urban Dictionary on this one. During the fall and winter months, people who would normally rather be single or promiscuous find themselves, along with the rest of the world, desiring to be quote-unquote cuffed, or tied down by a serious relationship. The cold weather and prolonged indoor activity causes singles to become lonely and desperate to be cuffed. Man, that is a pessimistic definition, chock full of negativity, and it's also implicit in the word itself, cuffed. Well, since I'm a more optimistic dude, let me give it another go. It's cold, it's dark, you want somebody to snuggle up and spend time, if not your life with. Welcome to partnering season. I like that much better. So is there science behind a phenomena that is clearly big enough for its own rap song and 18 million Cosmos-style articles all over the web? Okay, 2 quick disclosures before I answer that. The first is that I run a business that does in fact dish out dating, relationship, and sex advice. I am not citing that as a qualification here, mind you. While I help guide content development, in addition to all my other leadership functions, I am not an advice author per se. I am a fine researcher, however, with a critical thinking mind and a desire to know the truth. Which leads me to my second disclosure, which is some of this information came from such trusted sources as MTV News. Okay, with that as a backdrop, a cross-section of psychologists surveyed have not noted any evolutionary or biological reason to mate in winter. In fact, there are some schools of thought that suggest that humans are actually evolutionarily evolved not to have specific seasonality, but rather to ensure that a protector is available year-round to deal with predators, various weather events, and so forth. But there are pressures in modern winter that sit outside of evolution, at least for the moment. The holidays in particular can lead to serious loneliness, as evidenced by the well-known uptick in suicide rates. And for the younger cast, there's also school season to consider. Time off from study means time to think about other things, including the opposite sex. Maybe especially the opposite sex. This can coincide with winter breaks, absolutely. And of course, there's the weather. When it's cold outside, there is a compulsion to stay in, something that can be way more fun in all the ways with a buddy. And what better way to keep warm? But all of what I've just said is based on guesswork and, well, probably no shortage of common sense deduction. So let's talk data. We love data. A seasonal 6-month pattern has been documented related to sexually transmitted diseases, pregnancy and birth, abortion, and sales of condoms. Even more interesting for the technically minded among us, Google search patterns also substantiate our desire for sex, if not human mating seasons in general. Search terms such as eHarmony, boobs, and XXX all coincide with winter and early summer cycles. Haha! Thank you, data. I love you, data. So were my personal assumptions accurate? That we snuggle up in winter and sex it up in summer? Well, according to the data, there probably is an increase for some folks during these times based on their personality, age, and geolocation. But like many other things in life, dating and love fall across a vast, there's that word again, spectrum. Peaks and valleys likely do exist for some if the data is to be believed, particularly as it pertains to sexual desire. But that doesn't cover all of us, and that's just fine. Keeps things awfully interesting, don't you think? A couple of springs ago, and speaking of spring, did I mention that spring is coming? I did, right? Well, if I didn't, you should know that spring is in fact coming, because it's almost spring. Spring! Anyway, a couple of springs ago, I was traveling around Thailand when I noticed a thing. Toilets all had these little hoses hanging off of them. Well, I'm a reasonably smart human, so it took me pretty much no time at all to sort out what these things were for. Blasting the booty after doing the duty. And while that is a type of bidet, there are certainly others. Sometimes they take the form of a type of sink. And modern toilets also feature bidet functionality. In particular, the Japanese, masters of all things technical, including the toilet, have integrated functionality that will both wash and dry back there. It is a wild, wild world that we live in. Now, bidet is a French word, curiously enough meaning pony. And the general etymological wisdom is that the word derives from straddling a bidet much the way a pony is written. Not quite the elegance of many of the Greek words I call out on Boom Knowledge, but there you have it. Now, I mentioned at the top of the show that my friend Laura had made an assertion. We Americans are hesitant to employ bidets for a specific reason. And by the way, Laura is Italian, and that device is quite popular in Italy. So she had heard that because bidets were used in houses of prostitution many, many, many years ago, Americans do not use them to this day due to a bias. And it is certain that bidets were popular among French prostitutes who believed that clean genitals were important, and this next statement totally dates them, possibly even reduced unwanted pregnancy. Sociologist Harvey Molotov stated in a book he wrote all about toilets that the British eschewed the use of bidets because of their association with French prostitution. And it's logical to assume this would extend to the Americans given the bidet's origin, which goes back to pre-United States world, the 17th century to be precise. Brits became colonists who took the toilet and left the bidet for the Europeans. Still another theory suggests that bidets were the one appliance too many in U.S. bathrooms because of size restrictions. And funny enough, and in spite of this, a very successful bidet was in fact invented in the US in the 1960s. It was picked up by Toto Limited in the 80s, and, well, we're back to the Japanese, and surprise, this hybrid toilet bidet design is now in more than half of Japanese homes, with total sales in excess of 17 million, thanks to an American. But regardless of the origin of why Americans don't currently use them, and actually, I suspect Laura probably heard something close to the truth in our unreasonable bias. A bidet makes a lot of sense. You wash your varying body parts with water. You wash your hands with soap and water. Why not hit your backside as needed as well? And in a true confession moment, coming back to my Asia trip and my first actual experience with the bidet hose, I saw the value enough that I installed them in toilets at my home. I've had to explain the deal to more than one guest who has puzzled over its existence. They are hygienic, they need not replace toilet paper, but rather augment, and I have zero shame over having them at all. Okay, time for the Frag List, which is a wholly random assortment of fascinating things that come across my desk in a week. Staying with the dating and minor love theme buried in this episode, a London man won back the love of his girlfriend after she completely lost her memory due to a series of seizures she had experienced. The young woman apparently lost all recollection of her parents, her life before, and her boyfriend of 7 months. It was a hard-fought battle, requiring loads of patience, since apparently she couldn't stand the sight of him at first. But they took long walks in the park and revisited favorite restaurants, and, well, he won her over for a second time. Now, I was pretty grumpy the week of Valentine's Day, so I'm glad I waited until March 2nd for this one. My tone would have been decidedly different had I reported this a couple of weeks back. And now, keeping with the toilet theme, which again I can't seem to shake, Peeps flavored Oreos are apparently turning people's poop pink. That was a lot of alliteration. And actually, Peeps flavored Oreos. Let's just stop right there. What the hell? That sounds completely horrific without the Dayglow feces. And we might as well totally round it out in theme, which is a Frag List first, by doing something related to alcohol. And actually, we'll do a small handful of fun facts. Here we go. Number 1, Winston Churchill's mother invented the Manhattan. Number 2, the Pilgrims stopped at Plymouth Rock because they were running low on supplies, and in particular alcohol. Number 3, Abraham Lincoln owned and operated several taverns, and also on the American front, in 1964, Congress declared bourbon to be the official spirit of the U.S. I think I'm feeling a little bit of pride, not nationalism, but like actual, what's the word? Number 4, a bottle of champagne contains 49 million bubbles or so. And finally, number 5, the phrase, mind your P's and Q's, derives from pints and quarts, used in English pubs as a warning to unruly customers. So mind your pints and quarts, people. We are now 26 for 26 on Boom Knowledge, invariably coming to an end. Thanks as always for taking this particular journey with me. And if you enjoyed the show, well, I would be so grateful if you subscribed. I release an episode twice a week, mostly Tuesdays and Fridays, mostly like clockwork, if the clock in fact had an occasional hiccup. An ornery micro guy in the gears who every once and again just decided to kick something out of spite. But yes, it's 99% on that schedule, featuring segments like the one you heard today, interspersed with interviews of fascinating people with no shortage of fuel to add to the knowledge explosion. To subscribe, simply search for Boom Knowledge in iTunes, or Stitcher, or whatever your favorite delivery method happens to be. You can find subscribe links on my website as well at www.boomknow.com. That's BoomKnow. Have an excellent weekend. Enjoy your dog-shaped booze, or your date, or your particular bathroom habits that are totally working for you. And I will see you next week in the future.
Boom Knowledge.